That's when there was a giant flash of light. I felt like my whole body was on fire. Every muscle in my body ached, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. The whole world went black, and I felt the gravity go from under me. I started to panic. Was I even going to survive? What had I done? Before we get into that, you need to know how I got there. I've always been a little different. From a really young age, I knew I wanted to be a scientist. When I was about 7, my mom passed away, and I was already feeling lonely because other kids weren't interested in the same things as me, but losing her made it worse. I started to spend all my time in my room working on paper mache volcanoes and rewiring remote control cars. I constantly had to distract myself, and science was always there for me. I didn't have any friends. How could anyone else get along with a girl who had lost her mom and was obsessed with science? I felt like no one would get me, so I just kind of stayed alone. It was easier than getting made fun of. Once I hit high school, I started sneaking away every chance I got to start on experiments and test different theories. No one at school was going to understand, so it was better if I just went off and did everything on my own. This is about the same time I met James. James was a new transfer to school, and we happened to be paired together in a science class. At first, I was kind of reluctant to talk to him, but soon we started talking and I realized we had a lot of the same interests. He knew what it was like to be alone. He told me he was one of the few people who would actually understand me. So we started dating. He was perfect. He was interested in all the same things I was, but he also introduced me to the paranormal. I became obsessed with ghosts and ghouls and seances and witchcraft. I couldn't stop thinking, what's out there? On top of that, it brought a lot of other things to mind about my mom's death. Was she floating around somewhere? Where had she gone? Most importantly, was there a way I could talk to her again? So I started doing research about electromagnetic fields and their relation to the paranormal. With all my research, I started to create a device. To others, it probably just looked like a weird pole with a bunch of dials on it. To me, it was the phone that was going to make it possible to talk to my mom. On a rainy, stormy day, when I knew it would work best, I called James and woke him up. I told him to meet me on a hill just outside town. He met me there, and we trudged through the rain to the top of the hill. I set up my device and got to work. With the headphones on, I started turning dials. To be honest, what I heard on the other end was freaky. It sounded like distorted voices, just out of reach. I kept adjusting the dial to hear more clearly, and that's when I heard it. I could have sworn it was my mother's voice. James started tugging on my sleeve, telling me it was time to go. But how could I go? I could hear my mother. That had to be her. I told James I had found her. James shook his head and told me I was probably just catching signals from other buildings and devices. Why was he trying to shoot me down like that? My mother was the one person I wanted to speak to more than anyone. I told him if he didn't believe me, he could leave. That's when he kind of blew up. He told me I couldn't waste all my time trying to talk to my mom. She was gone, and it was clear the device wasn't working. Why couldn't I just let her go? Overhead, thunder started to crackle, but I didn't care. I was seeing red. How could the person who had encouraged me to like the paranormal be the person that was telling me it wasn't real? I stood up to yell at him, and that's when it happened. A massive boom overhead shook me to my core. The bright flash of the light practically blinded me. I didn't have time to think, to process anything that was happening, before the pain washed over me. I can't even describe what it felt like. My whole body was stiff, burning. For an instant, it was like I was in a bubble of light. As fast as the light washed over me, I was on the ground, staring up at the rain. I couldn't move. I struggled to breathe, my heart pounding in my chest, all out of sync. My ears rang as the world around me became distorted. Then everything went black. In the blackness, I heard chatter all around me. People were trying to wake me up. I tried to open my eyes, but I couldn't. The pain was so bad. I wanted to sob, to scream, but I couldn't. When I woke up much later, I was staring at a hospital ceiling. My dad was looking down at me, his eyes puffy from crying. He told me I had been struck by lightning and that I needed to stay still. I felt like my body was floating, like the whole world around me wasn't real. I tried to look at my hand, but my entire body was bandaged. How was I even alive now? As the days passed, I got to learn more and more about what happened to me. I had burns over 80% of my body. I was going to have muscle aches and spasms for the rest of my life. It was going to take me a while for me to be able to walk again. But even with all that, I was incredibly lucky. Most people wouldn't survive, my doctor told me, especially ones who were alone like me. I asked the doctor what she meant by that. I wasn't alone. I mean, James was with me. Not that he was much help, I'm sure. The doctor changed the subject and started unwrapping my bandages. That's when I saw it for the first time. There were burns over my skin that looked like tree roots, places where the electricity had spread through my veins. Honestly, it was really hard to look at. For the next couple of days, I was in the hospital. Every night, I asked my dad where James was. He told me that James wasn't allowed to visit. I was crushed that only apparently family could be in my room, but even more crushed when I realized what this meant for my body. I had already been so alone for so long. I was the weird girl whose mom died in the first grade. I was the girl who did experiments by herself and sat out of every kickball game. Now, on top of that, I was the girl who looked like a horror movie villain. My skin was scaly and painful to the touch. How the heck was I supposed to make it through high school now? By the time I was released from the hospital, news had spread. Everyone knew what had happened to me. As if that wasn't bad enough, getting home was actually really scary. I was on my own without the help of doctors and nurses, but everything still hurt. Everything still hurt so bad. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. On top of that, I was having weird nightmares. Nightmares I'd never had before. It was like that lightning strike unlocked some weird part of my brain I had never used. I called James the day I was released, and it went straight to voicemail. I was confused. I tried calling again and again throughout the night, but he never answered. Was he okay? Was it just too scary for him to see me that way? The next morning, I went back to school for the first time. Walking down that hallway was terrifying. Everyone was looking at me, staring. I could hear their whispers everywhere that I went. Wasn't me looking like this bad enough? Why did they have to be talking about me? Even worse, when I sat down in class, people sat at least a desk away from me. What was up with that? Was I so disgusting that people couldn't even be near me? I scoured the school for James the whole day, but he was absent. By lunch, I had had enough. There were no empty tables. I had to join a table with other people, and they immediately picked up their trays to move. My body ached, my spirit was crushed, I looked like a nightmare. Have you ever felt like that? Just alone and broken? Like everyone around you didn't like you? It's a scary feeling. That's why I'm asking you not to judge me for what I did next. I yelled out, asking why everyone was so afraid of me. Did I look that horrible? Was I really that ugly? I felt the tears welling in my eyes. If James were here, I wouldn't be so alone. One of the girls who were moving, Kelly, turned to me. She told me I actually looked kind of cool. I asked why everyone was avoiding me. She told me they were told I still had lightning in me, and that if anyone touched me, they would get zapped. I couldn't believe the stupidity I was hearing. I asked who she heard that dumb rumor from, and her answer stopped my heart. James had told them. But why would James tell them such a lie? And where was he? I went home that night crying. My dad cornered me and asked me if the kids at school were mean. I told him about James. His face went ghost white. He told me I needed to stay away from James. My stomach churned with anxiety. How could he say that? James was the only person who ever understood me. He was the only person who didn't make me feel like a freak. My dad sat me down and told me the truth. When I had been struck by lightning, James ran away. He left me smoldering in the dirt. Basically, he left me to die there. I felt the tears sting my eyes. How could he do such a thing? Suddenly, everything started to make sense. James had been allowed in the hospital room. He just didn't visit. The weird thing the nurse said, I was lucky to be alive because I was left alone there. And then him spreading that rumor around school. Was that so people wouldn't believe me if I told them James had left me alone? So I was completely alone and he couldn't be the bad guy? I took a few days off from school to collect myself. And in that time, I realized James blocked me on social media. And he even transferred schools. Once again, I was totally and utterly alone. How was I going to make it through school without him? My dad tried to calm me down. He told me if I actually talked to people, I'd be surprised how nice some of them were. I put on a brave face and went back to school. I still felt like an alien, or like a fish in a fishbowl that everyone was staring at. I started to feel sick to my stomach. But that's when Kelly came up to me. She told me she knew I liked the paranormal because James had told everyone what I was doing when I got struck by lightning. I felt my face turn red hot. Great! Now everyone really knew I was a freak. What Kelly did next surprised me. She told me she had a paranormal club she ran at school, and she invited me to join. I was shocked. There were other people that liked the same stuff as me? I was nervous, but after school, I joined them. Kelly even helped push my wheelchair for me. The club was awesome. People got the references I was making. We talked about science and ghosts and absolutely everything I loved. Had these people been there the whole time? Honestly, it shocked me to realize there were people just like me around me the entire time I was growing up. I just wasn't looking for them. Some members of the group had even lost parents, just like I had. As the months passed, my scars started to heal and my friend group started to grow. Now I have a really good group of friends, and I've realized that honestly, there are a lot of weirdos in the world. And I'm happy to be one of them. There are always people around you that you can relate to and want to be friends, even if it doesn't seem like there are. I hope you liked my story. Have you ever felt alone? What are some ways you found your group of friends? Let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.